Hi guys, welcome back to what is going to be our last module with the bones. So we're in the final stretch now and we're talking about the pelvic girdle today. So the pelvic girdle, much like the shoulder girdle, is the area in which your joint attaches to your axial skeleton and then your appendicular skeleton attaches there. So your shoulders and your hips are analogous. So much more so in our quadrupeds, right? Our animals that walk on all four. The function of the shoulders and the hip is much more similar. Where in humans, the shoulders and hips are very different because we walk on two legs. So if you are an investigator and you find skeletal remains, you'll notice that in animals, both in the hip bone and the shoulder bone, the scapula and the pelvis, that they'll be much more elongated, right? They're going to be really long, sort of skinny bones, right? Where in humans, they're sort of wider and more fan-shaped. So that's a really important indicator that even if you find really small bones of a child, you can kind of tell right away if you have the scapula and the os coxae, which is the proper term for the pelvis, if they are human remains or not. So those are really two big indicators. And the pelvis area is going to be very telling for age and gender as well. So let's dive in. The first bone that you guys have on your term sheet, so make sure you're checking in those course resources for your term sheets, okay, is your sacrum. So the sacrum is that sort of last part of the spine that's going to attach to your os coccygis or your pelvis bone. So in your book, you have that starting on page 242, and they've got some great pictures in there. So just so you guys can see as a point of reference, those would attach like that, okay? So the sacrum, again, looks like a bunch of vertebrae that have been fused together, and that's pretty much what they are. So let's dive into those. The first term you guys have is your ala. So if we're looking at the superior side of this bone, right? These little things that stick up on either side that I'm holding on to, that I'm pinching with my fingers, this is the ala, okay? The ala. Next, we have our transverse lines. Get a good angle with the lighting. So these lines here that look like it's fused bones, a bunch of vertebrae that are fused together, those are your transverse lines, right? They transverse. They're transverse lines. They do exactly what they're named for. Next, we have our sacral foramina. So we know our foramens are whole. Foramina is just plural for foramen. Foramina, so we have several holes or sacral foramina. So you can see that I have 4 down either side. And then this is an area, so this is the posterior view, where all of these nerves sort of come out of. So this is where the end of your spinal cord is, and then you have all of your nerves that kind of go down, come out of here and spread out into your lower limbs. So this, if you're sitting on this, you can see why you might have like your leg fall asleep, right? If you've been sitting for a really long time, because you have a whole bunch of nerves that are coming right out of here and down into your legs. Median crest. Okay, so that, oh, no, sorry. Superior articular facets. I don't want to skip any. So these here, these little horns that look like they're sticking up. So remember in our vertebrae, we talked about them looking like, depending on the animal, like either ears or horns sticking up. This is where it would attach to your last lumbar vertebrae. So these are your superior articular facets, okay? And again, that's where it would attach to that last vertebrae, would be sitting there. Your median crest, so we know that median means closest to the midline. We're actually going to look at the posterior side, okay? And this here that runs right down the middle of this bone, that is your median crest or your median spine, but we're going to use median crest as our term. And then your sacroiliac joint. So this area here, okay, so on either side, you're going to see this roughened area. That's the joint, your hip joint here, where it attaches to the pelvis. So that's your sacroiliac iliac joint. All right, so that's everything for the sacrum. We do have listed in your term sheet the coccyx, which I don't have individual bones for because it's very, very small. So I'm going to show that to you in the book. I don't have any landmarks on it, but the coccyx is your tailbone. So there's a few little bones that sort of stick out from the bottom of the sacrum, and that's what we refer to as our tailbone. Okay, so we're going to dive into the big meat and potatoes in this lecture, and that is your ox coxae. So if you are used to calling this your pelvis bone, I understand it's the sort of common term for this, but the scientific or anatomical term for this bone, for the pelvis bone, is your os coxae. Okay, so your os coxae is made up of actually 3 different areas. So in infancy, there are cartilaginous sutures between each one so that this remains flexible when you're an infant, and then it starts to fuse, especially as toddlers begin to walk on 2 feet or bipedally. This all becomes fused. So that can be a good indicator of age. Do you see the cartilaginous joints? Are they recently fused? Are they completely fused? So there's different time periods in your growth period, or in your growth, that those fuse and become like this, like indetectable. So the 3 portions of the bone, the first one is this big fan-shaped area, right? And if you were to touch your hip bone, that's what you're touching, okay? You'd be touching this sort of area here. This whole fan area that my hand is covering is called the ilium, okay? So this is all the ilium. Okay? The second area we have is sort of this middle area. So I'm going to put my hand around it right here. So everything that my hand is holding right now, so it's all of this hip joint, the bottom part here. So if you were going to put this properly, the bottom, right, and it sort of goes up to here. So everything here is called the ischium. The ischium. So you're actually sitting right now, your butt is sitting on the ischium. And then the front portion, the most anterior portion here, where your pubic area is your pubis. Ilium, ischium, pubis. And the pubis sort of starts kind of like halfway through this fossa right here, this area here. It's a pretty small little area. Okay, so ilium, ischium, pubis. Those are the 3 areas. And so when we talk about the next few landmarks, they will make sense because they're going to be named kind of in those areas. So the first we have is the iliac crest. Yes, is that our first one? Yep, iliac crest. So this is your iliac crest. Again, if you're going to touch your hip bone, you're touching a part of your iliac crest. Okay, so it's this area here, your iliac crest. Your iliac tuberosity. Okay, so let's go ahead and just add this so we can get our bearings. Okay, so towards the back, right here, there's this big sort of chunky area on the posterior side. That is your iliac tuberosity. So you see that big sort of thick, chunky area. So whether you're looking at this side, which is your internal, or this side, which is more of external, it's this area right here at the back, okay? Which is right sort of superior or on top of that articular surface. Sorry, I had a little bit of a brain fart. So your articular surface is where this articulates, okay? So I'm going to see if I can flip this. So you can see how thick that tuberosity is there, right? You can see that thickened tuberosity. And then on the interior side of that, there's this whole rough area. And that's where you articulate with your sacrum. So that's your articular surface. We have our iliac fossa. So a fossa is an area of depression, right? This is all internal. So again, I'm going to hold up this sacrum so you can get your bearings, okay? So this internal depression, so you can see this internal depression, I like to call our gut bucket. So inside that fossa, I'm back up. I always want to get closer, but I should back up in some of these. Is where all of your like intestines would be sitting inside that iliac fossa. Greater sciatic notch. Okay, this one's huge. And this is very weird because when we looked at our skull, we determined that our skull that I had in my box that I brought home was probably a female. This is a male pelvis based on this greater sciatic notch. So whoever put this box together was not keeping this in tune with any kind of gender. So if we were a detective, we would think that we had bones from two different skeletons because we have a male pelvis and a female skull. So this notch here, so it's this notch, okay? And again, it's going to be towards the back, the anterior side. So remember I talked about those nerves? So the nerves from your fossa and your sacrum are coming from your spine, and they're kind of, we have a sciatic nerve that goes right through there, okay? So somebody says they have sciatica, that's the nerve that's being affected. So this is your greater sciatic notch. It's on the posterior side. Now this, see how narrow this angle is? We look at the angle of this notch, okay? This is very narrow, okay? There's not a lot of wiggle room. Like if I were to put my hand in there, do this way. Like one of the tricks I tell my students is that if you put your hand in there and you can't wiggle it, like it's really a tight fit, that's a tight angle. That's a male, okay? Well, we're going to estimate that it's a male. Okay, so this skeleton would give us some pause because we have some gender estimations that would say it's a female and others that say it's a male. So we would really take a deeper dive to determine if we have two different skeletons or one sort of just outlier. So this is very narrow. The picture in your book, so if you guys go to your book, the Coccyx starts on 248. I would estimate, you see how big, that's your the sciatic notch right there. That's a really big angle. That's probably a female. Okay, so if you, let me see if I can compare these two. So look at that angle. That's really narrow. This one looks pretty big. So again, if you could put your finger in there and it's not moving too much, that's a narrow. Females, you'll see, they might have a notch that's like you could really get a lot of play in that notch. So that's important. That's another way of determining gender as a detective. So you guys may see some of that coming up in the chapters in the bad book where they talk about gender estimation and things on the skull or things in the pelvis. Great, ischial spine. This one's a little bit hard to see. So if we're looking at, so we found our ischial tuberosity, which was in this sort of thick area towards the posterior. If we move more towards the anterior, we're going to see, let me get you a good angle. So this is more towards the front. Do you see how it thickens again right here? So this is like literally if you guys were touching your hip bone, sort of that most lateral part where you guys would touch, you're probably touching that. And it's hard to see here, but that sort of thickening follows all the way down, sort of that external portion. Okay, that is your iliac spine. Do we have a good picture of it in the book? Just trying to see if you guys have a good picture of your... Not really, but that's the iliac spine. Okay, so you can see sort of this more thickened area. Iliac spine. I'm sorry. Ischial spine. So that's actually not your. Sorry, I added a term, and that's my fault. I got confused. That's actually your iliac pillar. That was my fault. I added the iliac pillar, which I don't have in your term sheets. So we can just discard what I told you. I gave you an extra term or an extra landmark. So that was actually the iliac pillar. And I'll just tell you why. So it just gives more, what, I feel like I've got to explain what it does because I told you about it. When you're bipedal, you have a lot of weight coming from your hip joint, right? This way, because you're holding your whole body weight. So that's why that pillar is there. It's for stability in terms of holding up your body weight. So that's what it is, but you're not responsible for it. My apologies. What I had thought, I was telling, it's actually the ischial spine we're moving to next. So that's your next actual landmark. So we're moving into the ischium. So your ischial spine, let's see if we've got a good picture of your ischial spine. Ischial tuberosity. You know what? I'm going to actually, oh, no, we do have a good picture of it. Okay. So your ischial spine, let me back up. So if we're looking sort of at the bottom part of that sciatic notch, okay, so the bottom of it, this angle here, is your ischial spine. Okay, so that's your ischial spine. And again, that's another sort of thick area. My camera's pausing a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to recap because I think my video just skipped a little bit, so I'm going to recap the ischial spine. So the bottom of that sciatic notch, okay, here it is. There's this area here that comes in and is really thick. So I'm holding it in my hand. It's really thick and robust, and part of it sort of moves into this joint. That spine is there again as another source of foundation. It's just a really thick area of the bone, so it kind of comes across here, the ischial spine. And that's important because, again, we're bipedal, so we're holding a lot of weight in this bone. So we have some areas that are thick. Lesser sciatic notch. So it's really, there's not really much of one here, but just below that ischial spine, so we find our greater sciatic notch, and then this is sort of the lesser sciatic notch. So there isn't much of one here. It's not very notchy, but again, it is lesser, so lesser means small. So greater sciatic notch, ischial spine, and then lesser sciatic notch. Acetabulum. Acetabulum, do we have a nice photo of that? Okay. Oh yeah, on 248, it's pointing towards your acetabulum. So this joint here, this sort of ball and socket, this is where the top, your head of your femur would sit. We call that the acetabulum, okay? So in your book, it's calling it the Acetabular Fossa or Acetabular Notch. I'm just going to give it one word, your acetabulum, okay? So that's the area in which that hip socket, the joint, would fit right into there, into your acetabulum. Your ischial tuberosity, okay, so again, let's get our bearings, okay? So your ischial tuberosity, at the very bottom, right, this is your butt. This is what you're actually sitting on, okay? You've got a tuberosity, okay? This is your ischial tuberosity, okay? Right here at the bottom. So in humans, it's not very big, right? This is your ischial tuberosity. In some primates, you'll see, so a great example, if you guys have ever seen the baboons that have like those big, round butt areas, we call those ischial like calluses because they sit, there's calluses that go right here. And that obviously helps protect their rear ends. If it was just all sort of soft, fatty tissue like ours, and you were sitting on your butt all day, it could cause a lot of pain, which it does. That's why we always say get up and walk around. So a lot of primates that you see who have those, big naked butt displays, those are actually calluses that sit on their ischiums that help protect them when they're sitting on the hard ground. So that is your ischial tuberosity. You're sitting on it. So if you can wiggle around, you can feel it. I'm on a hard wooden chair. I can feel it. Obturator foramen. The big hole right there in the middle, right? It's the foramen that's sort of in between our ischium and our pubis. That's our obturator foramen. Okay, back up. Obturator foramen. And then the last one I have is the pubic symphysis. So do I have another? Let me just see if I have a second pelvic bone. I might only have. Nope, I didn't need two. Okay. So this is the area in the front. Okay, so imagine where my head is. It's your sacrum. This is, yeah, okay. Just wanted to see if they both looked like they were male. Where those two pubic bones come together in the front, that's your pubic symphysis. Okay, so that's your actual pubic area. Okay, so right. So, and it's got a big sort of thick. So these two bones are not like right smack dab in between, like connected. It's sort of a thick cartilaginous area that connects these two. And that's really important. So the pubic symphysis isn't two bones that are rubbing together. They have a really thick padded cartilage area. And that's important for women when they give birth because that becomes much more flexible. So if you've ever been pregnant, all of your joints become real loose. All of your cartilage, you release hormones that allow all of your cartilage to kind of become more gel-like. And so that joint here at the pubic area, okay, sorry guys, I keep pausing because it looks like my video recording isn't being steady, which is very weird. Anyways, I apologize if you're getting weird pauses where I'm just sort of staring at the screen and sighing. Anywho, the pelvic symphysis, that loosens up so that this pelvic or hip joint can become flexible during childbirth, okay? Because you've got to fit the head of a baby through that little area, okay? So it's not that wide. So it loosens up so that makes that joint really flexible during childbirth. So as women get to sort of their third trimester, they release hormones that make all of their cartilage sort of more gel-like and loosey-goosey so that you can flex that joint. Okay, so that's another area that we can tell gender. So you see how this is kind of smooth? This is kind of smooth. And so that's another way that we would sort of estimate that this is a male. In a female, this joint would have like a lot of ridges, okay? So I'm sure somewhere in your book we'll get to that. We'll definitely talk more about that in our like crime scene stuff. But this would have a lot of ridges, sort of horizontal ridges if it was a female. And the reason is that that joint becomes looser. So it loosens for childbirth and then it kind of stiffens, stiffens back up again and then loosens. So there's more movement in that joint in females than there is in males. So the greater sciatic nerve and the pubic symphysis are two areas in which we see a lot of movement or change. I'm just going to do a quick little scoot through the book and see if there's a page that shows that pubic symphysis. Ah, yes. Okay. So if we go all the way to 375, so we can see, 378. Those are the pubic symphysis. Okay. So we can see the difference in males and females in that pubic symphysis. And then it's also a good way to age a skeleton. So if you know you have a female pelvis, but it's very, very smooth, it's probably an older female. So that's a key point for not only like estimating gender, but also age. And then just one more point on the os coccyx. On page 253, you can see where those three areas are actually separated. So these two pelvis or os coccyx are from younger individuals who have not fully fused those sutures. So it says that the one on the left is a 1-year-old and the one on the right is a 6-year-old. So this is the pelvis. This is the pelvis of a 1-year-old. This is the pelvis of a 6-year-old. So that those are separated. So you know that those are much younger individuals. Okay. So hopefully we got through that. There was some weird video things going on, so I apologize if things got jinky in the middle, and it just looked like I was sawing the screen, or it jumped around a bit. If you do have any questions, always shoot me an email. Make sure you guys are checking out the course resources for the term sheet and doing your discussion topic, and I will see you guys in the next section.